Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind ThatKaitoDan, and welcome to my analysis for the RWBY World of Remnant, all about the Faunus. So I've torn myself away from some Pokemon Moon goodness, cause it's time to talk about another World of Remnant. Surprised we got one so soon after the Between the Kingdoms one, but it is fair given that it was during Thanksgiving week for everyone in America, and the RWBY do deserve some R&R before we head into the midway point for the volume. And look what we got in the meantime, a heavily requested topic. We've all wanted more on the Faunus, so this is a welcome watch for me. But enough rambling, let's get into this. So we begin with Crow pointing out that the only visual difference between the Faunus and the humans are, of course, the animal traits, with the Faunus only having one element from their animal inspiration. We can see that, for example, with Blake and Neon, both of who are cat Faunuses, but Blake has the ears of a cat while Neon's rocking the tail. It's in this segment where we hear of a lizard Faunus also being a thing for the first time, our very first reptilian type Faunus, which could even regrow its lizard tail if it wanted to, at least according to Crow. I doubt all Faunus can regrow their limbs, and this would only just be a trait that comes naturally to the lizard factor. But it's cool to hear at long last that reptile Faunus are a thing, which I'm sure makes some OC makers out there very happy. Though the jury's still out on if there's such a thing as a bird or a sea-inspired variant. These lot have seemingly been around for as long as humans have, though there is apparently a fuzzy period at a certain point. Now why is that? Why would there be a point in history where the Faunus race seems to, vanish from history? Could the humans have tried to make the whole kind disappear from the volumes of history, or was there perhaps some period in time where something was affecting all living things, Faunus and humans? I don't know, this tidbit just feels a little too curious just to make it seem like the past is mysterious. What isn't that mysterious is how things are regarding kids when Faunus are involved. Humans and Faunus are biologically compatible, so the two can hook up and have children. But depending on the parents, there are different outcomes. If the parents are both humans, they get a human child. The same can apply for, say, two wolf Faunuses, they just have to have a little wolf cub instead. If a human and a Faunus were the parents though, they typically still get a kid similar to the Faunus side. But if the two Faunus parents were of a different animal, as shown here with a wolf and a bull example, then the results vary. The kid could be a wolf, a bull, or even a completely different animal. This was discussed in the past outside of the show, but it's the first time that it's been dropped in a World of Remnant, and it's still very interesting, especially with that last pairing making some unique randomness options. I do like that we know mixed race families can be a thing, and I even find it kinda sadly poetic that regardless of the two sides being so similar even in biological terms, though a lot of the Faunus kind are still a mystery even within Remnant, here we are with one race having a large history of being abused by the other over the years. This mistreatment of the Faunus has been going on for so long, even in the early days of man. Though admittedly, I can see why some were fearful and lashed out. It's not right at all, I fully admit, but if I was in those times when the Faunus were not common knowledge, and if I saw someone who looked as human as me, say for fangs, claws or beyond, coming towards me, I'd panic too. It's the fear of the unknown, and back then, the Faunus were the unknown. People would likely spread lies and confuse claims about these lot as something to fear, shun, force out, or even hunt down. The human race outnumbered the Faunus during those times, and those who wished to live free of any Faunus or any mistreatment would have to fight for such land that was also spared of any Grim, a difficult feat to accomplish during these dark times. So it's no shock that these clashes covered all over the world. Though in this shot, we didn't see any skulls symbolizing the conflicts over what was then Mantle, while there were some in the nameless Dragonland and what would eventually become Menagerie. It could be intentional, but I just see it as the skulls being randomly placed to show the large spread of fights across Remnant, and Mantle was likely in that period of time where it was still trying to cope with just living with the harsh conditions of the land. However, the world did get its first united moment for both races, when a town in Faunus was attacked by the Grimm, and yet it survived because these two species joined forces rather than fight each other, united on common ground to live through this terrible moment, and that they did. This became a small glimpse to the world of what is possible when both sides work together. I imagine we'll see this village actually in the future, and I wouldn't be shocked if it's actually a pure haven where both sides are at peace and work hand in hand, like the human and monster shared home of Trianguli from Dragon Quest VIII if you played that game. Which you should, because it's a pretty freaking awesome game, and it's coming out for the 3DS soon, but I'm getting off track. Sadly, while this event showed the world that human and Faunus can work together, doesn't mean things became completely better. While both sides were able to aid each other far more than ever before, the humans did take advantage of the added strengths that the Faunus had with their animal traits. There wasn't a balance, as one side was still benefiting far more than the other, and treatment of the Faunus still differed good or bad depending on where you were. The next big change though came when something shook the entire world: the Great War, which we actually got a bit of information on, surprisingly, with knowing the sides. It wasn't a free-for-all as many of us speculated. In fact, it was actually Vacuo and Vale against Mantle and Mistral. Alliteration aside, the two sides are actually quite intriguing to look at. It makes sense why Vale and Vacuo were on the same side, since they share the same landmass. If they were on different sides, it could bring some major difficulties for both. But then I remembered what Ospin said about the war in the past. He once said that the war was fought over the very concept of individualism, and it included a lot of art being destroyed. Makes me wonder then, now we know the fight was 2 versus 2, which side was trying to suppress self-expression? Both sides could have tried to impose their culture over the others to make theirs the more dominant and impose their stance across Remnant, but that's interesting in regards to the side of Mistral and Mantle. One is a kingdom that's rich in culture, and the other is far more into its mining and military aspects. This is just speculation, but what if Mistral tried to impose its beliefs and culture over Vale and Vacuo, and they refused, wishing to keep their lifestyles strictly their own? This kingdom from the east perhaps was trying to crush their expressive works and practices with its own, and in the end, they must go to war to defend their cause. Mantle could have perhaps been convinced by Mistral to aid them with the promise of supporting the Northern Kingdom with their rise to being a more stable nation in return for its dust and military might. The war in the end, as noted before, was so devastating that regardless of any victor, both sides lost hard, and together they wished to never repeat such a calamity birthed by hatred and conflict. So naturally, when you try and fix something, you look at the cracks, and the biggest one had to be the mistreatment of the Faunus. So the Faunus were finally given equal rights at long last, and as an additional element, the race was given the entire land in the far southeast, likely Mistral's, as their own to do with as they please. This of course would be the future Faunus safe haven known as Menagerie. But it's not a prize that was met with universal approval. Some did take it up happily and see it as deserved and fair. Heck, how many Faunus people would have just suddenly found their first real home or first taste of freedom? I'm sure this was more than enough, but to others, this was a weak effort from the kingdoms. Again, I kinda can't blame some ire here. These guys have been tormented and looked down upon for ages, far longer than many of them were even alive, and after all that pain, a small land in comparison to the much larger continents in the rock bottom of Remnant feels less like an apology and more like a subtle way of saying, we're sorry, here, you can have your equal rights and freedom from abuse, but you only get this haven in this one small section of Remnant. the rest of the world is come as it is. Not to mention, just because they got the equal rights and the promise of fairer treatment, it doesn't mean everyone suddenly changed their minds about the other and became bosom buddies. You want proof? Well, look no further than current day Remnant. Even though Menagerie is widely seen as the most accepted area for the Faunus, the scars from the past still linger, and while some still campaign for true equality, some went out and physically fought for it, or perhaps dominance over their former oppressors. Menagerie even seems to be where the high amount of Faunus willing to make a difference led to the formation of the White Fang, both in its more equality-focused efforts that was its original purpose, and in its more infamous days, where the pain and anger has risen up into the world's most prominent Faunus rebellion that is making its mark all across Remnant. And that's it, folks, for this analysis. Overall, this was a fascinating watch, as expected, for one of the most highly requested topics from myself and fans alike, and I think we got enough for now. While I would have liked to have a bit more in terms of the Faunus culture and lifestyle, I know we'll see some of it through Blake and Son soon enough when they get to Menagerie, so I can be accepting there. And while some of the information like the genetics of childbirth was already known to a degree, it being placed in the world of Remnant makes things much easier for those curious about the Faunus kind, and it did leave us with some clearer insight on the past conflict for both races, and even a better understanding of the Great War, another topic that many of us want some more clarity on. So yeah, I'm quite content. But what about you guys? Was there enough in this world of Remnant to satisfy your curiosity? Or did you want more about the Faunus? Let me know in the comments down below, plus like and fave the video if you wish, and be sure to subscribe and click on the bell to know when new uploads are up. And please do follow me on Twitter at ThatKaitoDan, as I'm always sharing more about RWBY and future uploads, as well as anything else on my mind. For now though, I'll be sure to see you all next time, so have a good day or good night, and peace out.